Good morning, folks, and welcome back to Wnen the Dust Settles. My name is Speaker Conway. Today is our second episode of discussing issues within correctional institutions. And so today we're going to talk about New York Governor, what's his name, Hochul, firing 2,000 correctional officers who refused to go back to work after 8,000 went on strike. And the rest went back. 2,000 refused to go back to work, and the governor fired the 2,000 of them. So, folks, do you think it was fair for the governor to fire 2,000 correction officers who refused to go back to work? Just to give you a little background of this story. This story, if you want to read the full story, go to Correction 1. They always bring you issues that happen across the country in correctional institutions, correctional facilities. So if you want to get the full story on this issue, go there and read. I was in New York in New York on Saturday, for my anniversary. And one of the things I saw on the billboard, I go into Staten Island on the ferry. I saw this billboard that New York City was hiring correctional officers, people who want to be correctional officers. And the starting salary was almost $83,000, I think $83,000. That's a lot of money. And while I was there, I started thinking about this story, because I saw this story while I was in New York. I started thinking about the story. Just to give you a little background on the story is that 8,000 correctional officers in New York State, I think from 32 different facilities, went on strike for complaining about poor working conditions, their safety within these facilities and stuff like that. And so these correctional officers went on strike without the union approval. The union didn't authorize the strike. The 8,000 guys walked off the job. So the governor saying that you cannot walk off the job if your union doesn't approve. If you do that, you are breaking state law. So you guys should go back to work. After a lot of negotiation between the striking workers and the state or the facility and what have you, these people still refuse to go back to work. Continued negotiation, the governor gave an ultimatum to them that if you don't go back to work, firstly, you are breaking state laws, and if you don't go back to work, you will be terminated. So as I already said, I was in New York, and during the time there was a marathon that was going on. I think about 5,000 people participated in the marathon. So it was an eventful weekend in New York. So coming back to where the governor said he had to go back to work. 5,000 plus people went back to work. 2,000 refused to go back to work. So on Monday, which was the 17th, the governor issued an executive order terminating these 2,000 workers, the 2,000 correctional officers. My whole thing, I think the governor's decision was harsh, because so I think the workers, the officers that refused to go back to work, should understand that they were also breaking state law, because as correctional officers, most correctional institutions have unions representing them. So in case there is an issue, while it's true that sometimes we get frustrated with our unions, we have to speak through our unions. We cannot just get up and just walk off the job. Especially so when this strike we're talking about in New York was never authorized by the union that representing these state workers. So why it is unfortunate that 2,000 of our brothers have lost the jobs. We need to understand that every institution that you're part of, you have to make sure you apply by the rules. Sometimes it becomes, frustrating that some of the problems or some of the issues that we are faced with are not solved by our union. But you should understand that this union doesn't just do things on its own. Everything they do, they got to negotiate with the power that be. They have to understand that they are operating within a contract. Every union has a contract. And I know these officers understand that we have to operate within the confines of the contract that we sign with the state. And as a state employee, I understand that, it is my responsibility to read the contract that I have. The union contract that we have to read it. What are the do's and what are the don'ts? And that goes for everything you do on the job. If you doing anything on the job, okay, lock the inmates in, or sell searches, or what are things that you're supposed to do. You got to read what are your do's and don'ts. So on this issue, the officers who refuse to go back to work, I don't know what part of the contract they were trying to use as the basics, the basic for the not to want them to go back to work. And we have to understand as people, why it's true we all in this the big organization. We are all responsible for our individual actions. Why do I say this, right? You have 8,000 people that were striking. You have 8,000 people that were striking, right? 5,000 or 6,000 of them went back to work. 2,000 people refused to go back to work. And I'm not trying to criticize those who didn't go back to work. They have their own reason, they have their own justifications, they have their own principles, they have their own morals, which of course I respect. It's easy to start to, criticize people when you don't know from their individual, vantage point why they are taking the decisions they are taking. But if you're in an organization, make sure that, you are doing things that is right for you and doing it within the confines of the law. Do you read your contract, and the contract says you can go on strike if you want to, and if there is a repercussion in the way that you get fired, what are your recourse? What are your options legally? You know what I'm saying? So I know those people who, the 2,000 guys who get fired, I know they might have read a contract and might find something that they are holding to not want to go back to work, and now they are fired. Maybe they have their legal recourse to challenge the governor's action in court. So as a correctional officer and as law enforcement, even any job that you're in, you have to always read your contracts, read your policies, read whatsoever documentation they give you to operate under. Like a few days ago or yesterday, my wife and myself, have to move from one location to another, and we get this U-Haul. All the time I use U-Haul to move things, right? But this day, I said, no, anytime I get the paper, I got to read the contract. When you go buy a car, they give you this big contract. You say, oh, I don't have the time to read it. It's not an excuse. It's not an excuse, because anything that goes wrong after you sign this contract, you're going to be held accountable for your action after signing the contract. So I read the contract, and I started to know some of the things that you need not do when you have the U or truck. You can't make somebody who didn't sign for the truck to drive it. Sometimes we do. In case of anything, you're going to be, in breach of the contract. Coming back to my fellow officers, I think their actions of not wanting to go back to work after 5,000 or 6,000 of their fellow officers went back to work, I think it was an overstretch of their actions. But we hope that the governor will reinstate the workers. I hope they will reinstate these high-working correctional officers who have put a time in to protect the safety and security of the public. I hope she will reconsider her decision so that the guys can go back to work. We don't want to see. We already have at the federal level. We already have people being fired by Trump and Elon Musk. We don't want to see our brothers and sisters losing their jobs because because of this issue. Firing there is one thing, but the issues that they raise is another thing too that the government has to look into. Poor working condition, officers working, being mandated to stay, work overtime that they don't want to. Staff shortages in most correctional institutions around the country. These are all issues, but I'm saying that we can solve these issues, through our formal framework we have, through the union and through our representatives. Why it's true, sometimes we feel frustrated that they are moving too slow on issues. There aren't any issues around us that moves fast. If you go to court, the issues are slow. If you go to the hospital, it is slow to see the doctor. Everything moves slow. So we should not want things to work the way we want it to work. We have to be patient and let the system work for us. Folks, my name is Pico Conway, and you're watching Wnen the Dust Settles on YouTube. Today is our second episode of discussing correctional issues, and we are talking about New York Governor Hochul firing 2,000 COs who refused to return to work after she ordered them to go back to work. 6,000 of them went back to work. 2,000 out of the 8,000 workers or COs that were striking refused to go back to work, and the 2,000 were fired. Not only that they were fired, but the governor ordered that they should not be hired by any state, county, or any other jails or prison within the state. But there are other sheriffs who are arguing that they need to give them the opportunity, to hire these guys because they have experience to work in correctional institutions. Folks, my name is Pico Conway, and as I said, I was in New York. I will bring you. I'll do a short episode on my visit to New York and some of the places I went, some of the things I saw. I was there when this marathon took place, and so that you can see some of the things that I saw. But today we're talking about correction again. This is our second episode. I'm talking about corrections, and we will talk to you next week. Until next time, stay safe. I will talk to you when I talk to you. Bye for now.